Let's talk about Yuji standing on actual trial for his mass murder in Shibuya when he fights this guy in a suit sitting in a bathtub. This is gonna be a long one, so bear with me. It kicks off as Yuji joins the calling game, a deadly battle royale involving countless participants overseen by Kenjaku, the mastermind behind it all. Yuji encounters this dude named Higuruma, who happens to be a lawyer, sitting casually in a bathtub. So Yuji urgently requires something from Higuruma, his points, which he had previously investigated to confirm he has. Why? Well, in this calling game, participants earn points based on their actions and the enemies they eliminate. These points grant individuals the power to introduce new rules to the game. Yuji and Megumi seek to make the calling game fairer for innocent and unwilling participants, such as Megumi's own sister, by leveraging these points, possibly saving a ton of lives. A reasonable request, at least to someone with a good heart, right? So of course, Higuruma's answer to Yuji is no. As someone with a legal background, Higuruma recognizes the limitations of the law, but acknowledges the unique power of the calling game's rule. In this game, violators face immediate consequences without the need for traditional legal processes like prosecutions and trials. Higuruma's goal is to maintain the integrity of the game's rules and prevent its early end, leading him to refuse to assist Yuji by sharing his points. You are just making things difficult, man. In response to Higuruma's refusal, Yuji fixes his request and instead of asking, demands access to Higuruma's 100 points, making it clear that many lives across the country are at stake. The tension escalates as the two prepare for a fight, with Higuruma summoning a Shikigami to stand behind them. This is fucking cool. The stats are revealed, revealing that Higuruma possesses 100 points and potentially eliminated about 20 sorcerers. Yuji carefully calculates his options and assesses his chances of emerging victorious in the upcoming battle against this guy. However, what Yuji fails to foresee is his opponent's domain expansion and the challenges it might present in their fight. Yeah, it happens fast, and Higuruma wastes no time. The main expansion, deadly sentencing. Yuji tries to strike Higuruma before he can trigger his curse within the domain expansion, but his attempt is pointless because violence is restricted within the domain. Despite the limitation though, verbal violence remains fair game, causing Higuruma to instruct the judge man behind them to initiate the next phase of their confrontation. And the Court of Law domain expansion begins. With the sound of verbal violence, I was so sure they were gonna roast each other so bad until one another couldn't take it anymore, but that's getting off track. Keep this in mind that Higuruma, we do see his backstory prior to this fight. He simply seeks fair trials for all parties involved without any complications. And the first question is something simple and not too crazy, just about a time for Yuji where he enters a parlor in 2017 despite being underage at the time, and he's under suspicion for that. In this situation, the judgment possesses knowledge about the individuals within the domain, but not Higuruma. The final decision is basically solely on the arguments presented by Higuruma and Yuji along with a piece of evidence. Judgment has submitted the evidence, which isn't entirely conclusive, and Yuji is unaware of its contents. To clear all doubts and secure a verdict of innocence from judgment, Yuji must present his case effectively and convincingly, which immediately I find cool as shit because this is definitely different from domain expansions that I'm used to so far in the series, and a lot more straightforward and easier to understand than some of the others in the past. It's something I totally should have expected from this Ace Attorney type of character. As Yuji contemplates the potential consequences of being found guilty, Higuruma informs him that he has three options: silence, confession, and denial. In the context of denial, false statements are allowed, as lying in court is not exactly uncommon. Higuruma points out that if everyone told the truth, trials would be unnecessary, and the defense proceedings begin. After careful consideration, Yuji decides that if this situation mirrors a real court of law, he could potentially confess to going to the parlor while underage and aim for a lighter sentence. Uncertain if the rules are the same to those of a genuine court of law, Yuji takes a chance and proceeds with this plan. But having a change of heart at the last minute, Yuji decides to reveal only half of the truth. He admits to entering the parlor, but claims it was solely to use the restroom and to take a dump. Into the evidence files we go. Higuruma uncovers the truth that Yuji had indeed entered the parlor with the intent of playing the machines, leading to a guilty verdict from Judge Man. Therefore, Yuji's ability to control his cursed energy is confiscated from this domain expansion ability. Yeah, they straight up just took that shit, making him powerless even outside of the domain. but not entirely powerless. After all, we know this cursed energy isn't Yuji's main arsenal and are very aware that he has his own massive strength from within himself. Seizing the chance, Higuruma enlarges a gavel and strikes Yuji with it, but despite the attack, Yuji's resilience enables him to block the blow. The relentless barrage continues, causing only a slight tear in the fabric of Yuji's sleeve. The reason behind the confiscation of Yuji's curse energy is due to the penalty inflicted, which temporarily renders him unable to utilize curse techniques. What's even more alarming is that Higuruma is starting to understand that Yuji might not require cursed energy to fight effectively, recognizing Yuji's extraordinary physical strength. It's pretty damn clear that Yuji relies on raw, immense power. Realizing the intensity of the situation, Higuruma decides not to take any chances with Yuji and once again enlarges his gavel, vowing to crush him with all his might. But this time, Yuji evades the attack and grabs hold of the gavel stick thingy, forcing Higuruma to quickly shrink it to prevent it from being taken from him. Taking advantage of this, Yuji kicks the bathtub towards Higuruma and gains the upper hand. In response, Higuruma hits the tub, causing water to splash into the air and blinding Yuji's view of his opponent for just a moment. As Yuji prepares for the near impact, he notices the gavel has transformed back into its smaller form. In a split second, Higuruma alters the gavel shape once more, this time into a huge fucking hammer that shatters even the floor beneath them. Despite the shock in his eyes, Yuji manages to withstand the force of the enormous gavel. As impressive as Yuji appears in this fight, a sense of concern starts to creep in as he grapples with the absence of his cursed energy. Racing against time to strategize, he realizes the necessity of finding a weakness and finding a way to bring the fight to a close already. In just a moment, a breakthrough occurs to Yuji: the court laws. Recognizing the importance of this discovery, he demands a retrial, which transports both him and Higuruma back to the domain expansion court. Here, Yuji begins to grasp the matters of this unique ability and finally understand it. It works like this: Judgment pronounces Yuji guilty and issues a sentence. However, if Yuji denies his guilt, he has the right to request a retrial, which Judgment must grant, allowing for a fresh review of the case. Oh man, and this next part hit me, and I should have seen this coming, but didn't. Instead of focusing on the previous case, Judgment has Yuji on trial, and Yuji now stands accused of mass murder in Shibuya. Yuji's face here was literally my face when I first read this part in the chapter, because we're all aware of how guilty Yuji feels about this incident and how he holds himself accountable to it all, even though it was Sukuna who took over his body and did the killings. Without hesitation or thinking, Yuji declines to oppose the trial, openly confessing to his crimes without any intention of denying or lying about them. Therefore, Judgment finds Yuji guilty and imposes a death penalty with confiscation. This is the harshest sentence Judgment can give, and Higuruma now transforms his gavel into the executioner's sword. And at first glance, it just seems like a sword Higuruma can fight with, but no. True to its name, the sword guarantees death to anyone it touches. Higuruma is furious as he sees only darkness in Yuji's eyes, along with emptiness and a barrage of chairs heading his way. Yuji cleverly takes cover from one of the flying chairs, then moves quickly to Higuruma's blind spot, throwing a punch and attempting to sweep the leg. Higuruma jumps up just in time during the fight, and Higuruma wonders why Yuji chose to confess to the crime instead of lying about it. It's revealed that the envelope submitted by Judgment as evidence was shared with the Sorcerer beforehand. Containing information about Sukuna residing inside Yuji, it's clear that Yuji was not the one responsible for the deaths in Shibuya. The question remains, why did Yuji willingly take the blame for the crime? In a final showcase of pure physical strength, Yuji delivers a powerful gut punch that sends Higuruma flying, finally defeating him. Despite the defeat, Higuruma makes sure to inform Yuji that Sukuna had possessed his body during the events in Shibuya. He explains that Yuji had no control over himself at that time. Yuji didn't willingly abandon his self-control. By all accounts, Yuji is innocent and didn't commit any crimes during the massacre. As we all know, how I mentioned earlier, Yuji remains burdened by guilt and still feels responsible for the tragic events. He insists that it is his fault, blaming his own lack of strength as the reason he couldn't prevent the tragedy from happening. This fight with Yuji reminds Higuruma of his initial motivation for pursuing a career in law: to protect and defend the weak like Yuji through the administration of justice. As the battle comes to an end, Higuruma decides to grant Yuji the 100 points he had requested earlier. Yuji is successful, and I do appreciate the heartfelt conversation that follows after their battle, and I really like Higuruma's character. Honestly, he could low-key offer guidance to Yuji in the future, maybe even becoming a replacement for Nanami. Hard to say that, but that might be the case. Nonetheless, Yuji has once again managed to transform a foe into an ally. Anyways, during the culling game, there's this thing called Kogane that allows players to view the rules, gather information on the game and other players, and most importantly, add new rules if they had enough points. In response to Yuji's request, Higuruma adds a rule that allows for the transfer of points between players, making it easier to gather points and introduce new rules. Once the rule is approved, Higuruma leaves. Curious about his destination, Yuji asks for Higuruma's assistance if he's willing to provide it. Now, I would have loved this because Higuruma is a damn cool character, but regrettably, Higuruma's last 2 points remaining are tied to the murders of a judge and a prosecutor he committed before he arrived to Tokyo. As for his next steps, he patiently waits for the barrier to open, and he's just pretty much gonna turn himself in. Realizing that staying with Yuji would make him feel even worse about himself, he chooses to depart for good. The Yuji versus Higuruma fight in the culling game stands out as one of my favorites due to the distinctiveness of Higuruma's domain expansion, the mention of the Shibuya incident, and Yuji's ongoing internal struggle originating from that event. But you guys let me know how you felt about this fight when you read it, and what you think about Higuruma's character at this point of the story. I'm saying this point because I'm hoping that he returns later on, and I don't know what he's gonna be like. Thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Make sure to hit that like button if you fuck with Gojo as a character, and make sure to hit that sub button if you're new to the channel. I'll see you guys on the next one.